I'd never felt fear until I observed humans in battle. Had studied many species. As a chronicler of the Galactic Collective, it was his job to watch, learn, and record. He had done this work for 400 years. He had seen warriors, hunters, and killers from across the galaxy. He had watched the tear apart their enemies with claws as long as human arms. He had documented the who fought with machines that felt no pain and never stopped. He had observed the swarms that moved like a single mind, billions of bodies acting as one. Had never been afraid. Fear was something other species felt. His people had evolved beyond such primitive emotions long ago. They observed, they recorded, they did not feel. This was what believed about himself. The Galactic Collective had sent him to study humans. They were a young species, only 300 years in space. This was nothing. Some species in the Collective had been traveling between stars for 1 million years. Humans were bobbies compared to them. But these bobbies had done something strange. They had grown fast, too fast. They had taken territory that older species wanted. They had won battles they should have lost. The Collective needed to understand why. So was assigned to a human ship called the Dawn's Edge. He would live among them, watch them, and send his findings back to the Collective. A simple mission. He had done similar work hundreds of times before. The ship waited for him at a space station on the edge of human territory. It was not a beautiful ship. Human vessels never were. They were built for function, not form. Sharp angles, thick armor, weapons that stuck out like thorns. The Dawn's Edge looked like it had been designed by someone who expected to be attacked at any moment. Perhaps that told something about humans already. Captain Park met him at the airlock. He was a middle-aged human male with short dark hair and calm eyes. He wore a simple uniform with few decorations. When he saw, he did something with his face. His lips pulled back to show his teeth. Knew this was called a smile. In most species, showing teeth was a threat. Humans used it to show friendliness. It was confusing. "Welcome aboard, Chronicler," Park said. His voice was warm but measured. "I hope you find us educational." Beside him stood a woman. Lieutenant Commander was shorter than her captain but carried herself like someone twice her size. Her eyes were sharp and missed nothing. She looked at the way a hunter looks at something it does not yet understand. "We have prepared quarters for you," she said. "The crew knows you are here. Most are curious about you. Some do not trust you. All will treat you with respect." Extended his sensory fronds in a gesture of thanks. His species communicated partly through these delicate appendages that grew from their heads like silver threads. "I am here only to observe and learn. I mean no harm." Park's smile changed slightly. It became something else, something could not read. "Then you have come to the right place, Chronicler. We will teach you many things." Did not understand what the captain meant. He would later wish he had asked. The first days on the Dawn's Edge were ordinary, followed his usual methods. He watched, he recorded, he analyzed. The humans went about their daily routines, and he documented everything. What he found confused him deeply. Humans were inefficient. This was the only word could find for them. They spent nearly a third of each day sleeping. A third. Species needed only 2 hours of rest per cycle. All that sleeping was wasted time, wasted energy, wasted potential. And the eating. Humans did not simply consume nutrients like sensible species. They prepared elaborate meals that took hours to make. They gathered in a large room called the mess hall and ate together, talking and laughing while they chewed. They could have swallowed nutrient paste in minutes and moved on to important tasks. Instead, they wasted hours on food. But the strangest waste was their free time. When humans were not working or sleeping or eating, they gathered in groups to do things that had no purpose at all. They played games with cards and small pieces on boards. They watched recordings of fictional stories. They made sounds with their mouths that they called singing. They moved their bodies in patterns called dancing. None of this had any tactical value. None of it made them better at their jobs. None of it helped them survive. Yet they did these things with great energy and joy, as if they mattered more than anything else. Recorded it all but could not explain it. His reports to the collective were filled with confusion. Subject species engages in extensive non-productive activities, he wrote. Purpose unknown. Possible cultural ritual. Further observation required. On his 10th day aboard, sat in the mess hall, watching the crew eat their evening meal. The noise was overwhelming. Humans were loud. They talked over each other, laughed at things did not understand, and seemed to take great pleasure in simply being together. Chief Medical Officer noticed him sitting alone. She was an older human woman with gray streaks in her black hair. Her face had many small lines, especially around her eyes. Had learned these were called laugh lines and came from smiling too much over many years. She carried a cup of hot liquid called tea and sat across from him. "You look confused, chronicler." "I am," admitted. There was no point in lying. Your species wastes much energy on activities that serve no purpose. It is inefficient. Laughed. It was a warm sound, not mocking. Those activities you call wasteful are what keep us human. They keep us sane. I do not understand. She sipped her tea and looked at him with eyes that had seen much. Someday you will, chronicler. When the fighting starts, you will understand why we need these moments, why we protect them so fiercely. Wanted to ask what she meant. He opened his mouth to speak. Then the alarms began to scream. Red lights flashed across the mess hall. The warm, happy noise of conversation died instantly. Lieutenant Commander's voice came through speakers in the ceiling, calm and clear as ice water. All hands to battle stations. Hostile contacts incoming. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. And watch the humans change. The people who had been laughing and eating seconds ago became something else entirely. Their faces went hard. Their eyes went cold. They moved with a purpose that had never seen in any species. No panic, no confusion, no wasted motion. Just pure, focused intent. Set down her tea without looking at it. She was already running toward the medical bay before could process what was happening. The young officer who had been teaching a card game, Ensign, transformed from a grinning boy into something else entirely. His hands flew across his console with deadly precision. His eyes held no warmth now, only calculation. Sat frozen in his seat, watching the transformation unfold around him. He had studied 400 species. He had seen warriors and killers beyond counting. He had never seen anything like this. I'd never felt fear until I observed humans in battle. Ran through the corridors of the Dawn's Edge trying to reach the observation deck. All around him, humans moved with purpose. They did not run in panic. They did not shout in fear. They flowed like water through the ship, each person knowing exactly where they needed to be. A young woman nearly collided with at a junction. She wore the gray uniform of engineering crew. Her name tag read Lee. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Expected to see fear. Any sensible species would feel fear when facing battle. Instead, he saw something else in her eyes. Something hard and bright like fire frozen in ice. She nodded once at him, then continued running toward the engine room. Finally reached the observation deck. It was a small room near the top of the ship with wide windows that looked out into space. From here, he could see the enemy approaching. The Dominion even knew about them. The collective had classified them as extremely dangerous. They were large, powerful beings covered in natural armor. They had conquered dozens of species across 3 sectors of the galaxy. Their tactics were simple but effective. Overwhelm the enemy with numbers, board their ships, and take what they wanted. Counted the enemy vessels. 12 ships against 1. The Dawn's Edge was outnumbered by a factor that should have meant certain death. He activated his recording equipment. Whatever happened here, the collective would want to know. On the command deck below, Captain Park sat in his chair with the calm of a man taking a morning walk. could see him through the internal display screens. The captain's face showed no fear, no doubt, no hesitation. "Status report," Park said. Lieutenant Commander responded from her station. 12 warships, Captain. Standard attack formation. They are moving to surround us." "Civilians." 1,600 souls in the lower decks, sir. Families from the colony we evacuated. They are secured in the protected sections." Park nodded slowly. His eyes moved across the tactical display, seeing things that could not understand. "They want the ship intact. They will try to disable us, then board." "Standard tactics," agreed. "They have used this approach against every species they have encountered. It has never failed." "Never failed against other species." Park smiled and felt something cold move through his body. It was not the warm smile the captain had used to greet him days ago. This was something different, something that showed teeth for a very different reason. "All hands, this is the captain." Park's voice went out to every speaker on the ship. "We have warships incoming. 12 of them. They want our ship. They want the people we are protecting." He paused. The silence stretched across the ship like a held breath. "Those people trusted us to keep them safe. Mothers, fathers, children. They came aboard this ship because they believed we would protect them. Today, we prove they were right. Today, we show what happens when you threaten our people." Watched the crew's reaction. No one cheered. No one shouted battle cries. Instead, something passed through the humans like a wave of electricity. Their faces grew harder. Their movements became sharper. They were changing, becoming something more than they had been moments before. "Whatever it takes," Park finished, "we will bring everyone home." In the engine room, Chief Engineer Moon heard the captain's words and began pushing his machines beyond their safety limits. He knew every system on this ship like he knew his own heartbeat. Today, he would ask them to give more than they were designed to give. In the medical bay, prepared for casualties, she arranged her supplies with steady hands and a calm face. She had done this before, in wars and disasters and moments of horror. She would do it again. She would save everyone she could and mourn the ones she could not. At the weapons station, his fingers danced across his console. He was young, only 24 years old. He had joined the military because he wanted to protect people. Now he would find out if he had what it took. At navigation, Shin plotted courses that should have been impossible. She saw the battle not as a moment in time, but as a flowing dance of physics and probability. She knew where the enemy would be before they moved. And in the corridors near the civilian quarters, Security Chief O checked his weapon and took his position. He was a quiet man who preferred growing plants to fighting. But between the enemy and the 1,600 souls behind him, there was only one thing: him. Watched all of this from the observation deck. His recording equipment captured everything, but he found himself unable to simply observe. Something was happening that his training had not prepared him for. The ships were close now. On the main display, could see them adjusting their formation. They were preparing to trap the Dawn's Edge in a ring of firepower. "They expect us to run," said. "Yes," Park replied. "They think we will try to escape and they will cut us off. It is what any sensible prey would do." "Should I plot an escape route?" "No." The captain leaned forward in his chair. His eyes never left the approaching enemy. "We are not prey. Navigation, plot a course directly into their formation." Shin's hands hesitated for just a moment. "Sir, that will put us in range of all 12 ships at once." "Yes, it will also put them in range of each other. They cannot fire on us without hitting their own vessels." Park's smile grew wider. "And we can fire on all of them." Sensory fronds went rigid with shock. This was not a defensive strategy. This was not even a desperate gamble. This was something else entirely. This was a species that would rather charge into certain death than abandon what they loved. They had studied human tactics. They had prepared for retreat, for surrender, for desperate last stands. They had not prepared for an enemy that would attack 12 ships with one, because no sensible species would do that. No logical mind would choose that option. But as was beginning to understand, humans were not always sensible. They were not always logical. They were something far more dangerous. "All hands," Park said, and his voice filled every corner of the ship. "Battle stations, we are going in." The Dawn's Edge turned toward the enemy formation and charged. Gripped the railing of the observation deck with all four of his hands. His hearts were beating too fast. His sensory fronds trembled. He had observed 400 species in his long career. He had watched battles and wars and extinctions. He had documented death on scales that would break lesser minds. He had never felt what he was feeling now. It took him a long moment to recognize the emotion, because he had never experienced it before. Fear. Pure primal fear. Not fear for his own safety, fear of the humans, fear of what they were becoming, fear of what they were about to do. The Dawn's Edge raced toward the enemy, and finally understood why the elder races of the collective were nervous about humanity. "I'd never felt fear until I observed humans in battle." The Dawn's Edge hit the formation like a knife through water. Had seen battles before. He had watched the great fleet engagements of the wars. He had documented the swarm attacks of the. He knew what combat looked like between starships. This was different. They had arranged their 12 ships in a perfect circle, designed to trap their prey and destroy it from all sides. It was a formation that had worked against 100 different species. No one had ever broken through it. Captain Park did not try to break through it. He flew directly into the center of it. The first ship opened fire. Its weapons were powerful, designed to tear through shields and armor. But the Dawn's Edge was not where the gunners expected it to be. Shin had already adjusted their course by the time the weapons fired. The shots passed through empty space and struck the ship on the opposite side of the formation. Chaos erupted among the enemy. They had never fought a species that used their own weapons against them. They had never faced an enemy stupid enough to fly into their formation. Their commanders screamed orders, trying to adjust, but the Dawn's Edge was moving too fast. Opened fire. The young weapons officer had spent countless hours in simulation. He had trained for moments like this, when targeting solutions had to be calculated in fractions of a second. His fingers moved across his console without conscious thought. Each shot found its mark. He did not aim to destroy, he aimed to cripple. Engines, weapon systems, shield generators. Each shot left a ship weaker than before. 3 ships disabled, reported. Her voice remained calm, but there was something underneath it now, something fierce. "They are attempting to regroup." "Do not let them," Park ordered. "Keep us moving, keep them confused." The Dawn's Edge danced through the enemy formation like a creature born for combat. Shin pushed the navigation systems beyond their rated limits. The ship turned and twisted in ways that should have torn it apart. She knew exactly how much stress the hull could take. She used every bit of it. In the engine room, Moon was performing miracles. His machines were screaming, pushed far beyond what they were designed to do. Warning lights flashed across every panel, but he knew his engines. He knew what they could really do beyond what the safety manual said. "I need more power to the forward shields," said over the communication system. "You cannot have it," Moon replied, "not without cutting life support." "Then cut life support to the empty sections." "Already done. I am now cutting it to the storage bays." "Good, keep us alive for 10 more minutes." Moon laughed. It was not a happy sound. "I will give you 15. They were not fools. They were a warrior species that had conquered dozens of worlds. They adapted quickly to the new situation. Their commanders pulled back, creating distance, reforming their lines. And then they launched their boarding pods. Watched the small craft detach from the ships. Each pod carried 20 warriors, the heavily armored soldiers that had never been defeated in close combat. Their natural armor could stop most weapons. Their strength could tear steel. "Boarding pods incoming," announced. 18 pods, approximately 360 enemy combatants. Park's jaw tightened, point defense. "Already firing, but they will get through." "How many?" "Estimate 8 to 10 pods, 160 to 200 boarders." The captain nodded slowly. His eyes went to the internal display showing the lower decks. 1,600 civilians. Mothers, fathers, children, people who had trusted him. "Security teams to breach points," he ordered. "No enemy soldier reaches the civilian quarters. Not one." O heard the order from his position near the main access corridor. He had 30 security officers under his command. Good people, trained soldiers, but they were coming with 200 warriors, each one stronger and better armored than any human. The numbers were against them. The odds were impossible. O checked his weapon and waited. Beside him stood a young officer named Han Sara. She was barely 20 years old, fresh from the academy. Her hands shook slightly as she held her rifle. "Chief," she said quietly, "are we going to die?" O looked at her. He thought about lying, about giving her comfortable words, but she deserved better than that. "Maybe," he said, "but that is not the question." "What is the question?" "The question is, what are we willing to die for?" Han Sara was silent for a moment. Then she looked at the corridor behind them, toward the sealed doors that protected the civilian quarters. Behind those doors, children were huddled with their parents. Families were holding each other, waiting to learn if they would live or die. "Them," she said, her hands stopped shaking. "I am willing to die for them." O nodded. "Then you already have your answer. The rest is just details." The first boarding pod hit the hull with a sound like thunder. Metal screamed as the cutting tools burned through the armor. Red emergency lights painted the corridor in the color of blood. Watched on the observation deck displays. His recording equipment captured everything, but he found himself unable to look away from the simple visual feed. His sensory fronds were fully extended, trying to process what he was seeing. The soldiers came through the breach like a flood. They were massive creatures, twice the height of humans and covered in bone-like armor that had evolved over millions of years. Their weapons were extensions of their bodies, biological artillery that could punch through ship armor. They expected the humans to run. Every species ran from the humans did not run. O opened fire first. His shots hit the lead warrior in the joints between its armor plates. The creature staggered. Before it could recover, 3 more shots hit it in the same spots. The fell. Its companions roared in anger and charged forward. The corridor became a storm of fire and blood and noise. The humans fell back, step by step, making the pay for every meter in bodies. Han Sara stood beside her chief, firing with a precision that surprised even herself. Fear had left her. There was no room for it now. There was only the weapon in her hands and the enemy before her. A warrior broke through the line. It raised its weapon toward O, ready to end his life. Han Sara threw herself between them. The shot meant for O hit her instead. She fell without a sound. O screamed, not in fear, in rage. He emptied his weapon into the warrior, then grabbed a metal pipe from the damaged wall and charged. There was 3 times his size. It should have crushed him easily. It did not. O fought with something beyond training, beyond skill. He fought with everything he was and everything he loved and everything he would never allow them to take. The pipe was not enough, so he used his fists. His fists were not enough, so he used his teeth. When the warrior finally fell, O was still standing. Barely. His uniform was torn and soaked with blood, some his own and some not. His left arm hung at a wrong angle. His face was a mask of crimson. But behind him, The door to the civilian quarters remained sealed. Not one soldier had passed. Watched this scene play out across his display. He watched humans die holding their ground. He watched them take wounds that should have killed them and keep fighting. He watched them smile through the blood and pain. And for the first time in his 400 years of life, of the third ring understood something his species had never grasped. There are things more frightening than warriors who feel no fear. There are warriors who feel fear and fight anyway. I'd never felt fear until I observed humans in battle. The battle for the Dawn's Edge lasted 3 hours. Recorded every minute. His equipment captured the tactical displays, the communication channels, the camera feeds from throughout the ship. Later, when he reviewed the recordings, he would find himself unable to watch them completely, not because of the violence. He had seen violence before. Because of what the violence revealed about humanity. In the medical bay worked without stopping. The wounded came in waves. Some walked supported by their companions. Some were carried on stretchers. Some arrived on floating gurneys, their bodies broken but their eyes still fierce. The chief medical officer moved from patient to patient with hands that never shook. She had learned long ago how to push her emotions aside during crisis. There would be time for grief later. Now there was only the work. A young engineer named lay on the table, her stomach torn open by weapons. She should have been dead. Any medical textbook would say she should have been dead. Saved her anyway. "You are going to live," she told the young woman. "Do you hear me? You are going to live and you are going to dance at your sister's wedding next month. Do you understand?" Barely conscious from blood loss, managed a weak smile. "Yes, doctor." "Good, now hold still. This is going to hurt." It did hurt, but did not scream. She bit down on the leather strap gave her and held on, because giving up was not something her species knew how to do. On the command deck, Captain Park fought a different kind of battle. The fleet had recovered from its initial confusion. They had pulled back and were now attacking from a distance, their weapons hammering the Dawn's Edge from all sides. The ship was dying. Park could see it in the damage reports, feel it in the way the deck shook beneath his feet. His vessel was strong, but nothing could take this kind of punishment forever. "Shields at 12%, reported. Her voice was still calm, but Park could hear the strain beneath it. "We cannot take much more of this." "Engine status." "Chief Moon reports the primary drive is failing. We have perhaps 10 minutes of combat capability remaining." Park closed his eyes for a moment. 10 minutes. Not enough time, not nearly enough time. Then he opened his eyes and smiled. "Get me a communication channel to the flagship." Looked at him in surprise. "Sir." "Do it." The channel opened. On the main display, the face of the commander appeared. It was a massive creature with a face and cold, intelligent eyes. Its name was, and it had conquered 40 worlds in its career. "Human," said. The universal translator made its voice sound like grinding stone. "You have fought well, better than we expected, but the battle is over. Surrender and we will spare your lives." Park laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "Spare our lives," he repeated. "Commander, you have not been paying attention. We are not fighting to survive. We are fighting to win." His eyes narrowed. "You cannot win. Your ship is destroyed. Your crew is dying. You have nothing left." "You are wrong." Park leaned forward. "We have everything left. We have 1,600 people counting on us. We have our honor. We have our duty. And we have something your species has never understood." "What is that?" "We have each other." Park cut the channel. He turned to, and his smile changed into something hard and sharp. "All hands, this is the captain. Prepare for ramming speed." The words echoed through the ship. In the engine room, Moon closed his eyes for just a moment. He understood what was being asked. He began rerouting all remaining power to the engines, bypassing every safety system. On the security corridor, O heard the announcement and nodded. He was still alive, barely. The assault had been pushed back, but at a terrible cost. Of his 30 officers, only 11 remained standing. In the medical bay, paused in her work. She looked at the wounded soldiers around her, at the young nurse beside her, at the walls of the ship that had been her home for 15 years. Then she continued working. There were still people to save. The Dawn's Edge turned toward the flagship. Watched from the observation deck, his sensory fronds extended to their fullest. He could not believe what he was seeing. The humans were going to ram their damaged ship into the enemy flagship. It was a suicide attack. It was madness. It was humanity. The commander realized what was happening too late. His ships opened fire on the Dawn's Edge, trying to stop it. But the human vessel was already committed. It pushed through the weapon's fire, its shields finally failing, its hull breaching in a dozen places. And still it came. "All hands brace for impact," Park announced. In the corridors, humans grabbed hold of whatever they could find. In the medical bay, threw herself over her patients to protect them. In the engine room, Moon held onto his console and closed his eyes. The Dawn's Edge struck the flagship at full speed. The impact was beyond anything had ever witnessed. Metal screamed. Fire bloomed. The two ships became tangled together in a mass of destruction. But the Dawn's Edge did not stop there. The impact had torn open the flagship's engineering section. Its reactor, exposed and damaged, began to fail. Warning signals flashed across the bridge. Their commander screamed orders, but it was too late. The flagship exploded. The blast wave caught 3 other ships, destroying them instantly. 2 more were crippled beyond repair. The remaining ships, seeing their flagship destroyed and their formation shattered, did something they had never done in recorded history. They ran. The great warrior species of the Dominion fled from a single human ship. Watched them go. His recording equipment captured the moment for history. A species that had conquered dozens of worlds, that had never known defeat, that had laughed at the young humans and their primitive technology. Running from creatures half their size, with inferior weapons and damaged ships. Running because they had finally understood what they were facing. On the command deck of the Dawn's Edge, Captain Park sat in his chair. The deck was tilted at a strange angle. Sparks fell from broken consoles. Blood dripped from a wound on his forehead. But he was alive. And his people were safe. "Damage report," he said quietly. Pulled herself up from where she had fallen. Her arm was broken, but her voice was steady. "Heavy damage to all sections. We have lost 30% of the crew, but the civilian quarters are intact. All 1,600 souls are safe." Park closed his eyes. 30%. So many lives, so many friends and colleagues and shipmates. But the mission was complete. The people they had sworn to protect were safe. "Send a distress signal," he ordered. "Let them know we won." Across the ship, those who could still stand began the work of rescue and repair. They moved through the wreckage, pulling survivors from the debris, putting out fires, sealing breaches. They were exhausted, wounded, broken. But they were not defeated. In the observation deck, lowered his sensory fronds slowly. His body felt strange. His mind was processing things he did not understand. He had observed 400 species in his career. He had seen warriors and conquerors and monsters of every kind. He had never seen anything like humans. And he finally understood why the galaxy feared them. "I'd never felt fear until I observed humans in battle." The memorial was held 3 days after the battle. The Dawn's Edge had been towed to a repair station by rescue ships. It would take months to fix the damage, if the vessel could be saved at all. But that was a problem for engineers and administrators. The crew had more important things to do first. They gathered in the cargo bay because it was the only space large enough to hold everyone. The room had been cleared of storage containers and debris. Simple white flowers decorated the walls. Someone had hung a banner with the names of the fallen. 47 names. Stood at the back of the crowd, trying to make himself small and unnoticed. He was an observer, not a participant. This moment was not for him. But he could not look away. Captain Park stood at the front of the gathering. He had refused medical treatment until everyone else had been cared for. His head was now wrapped in white bandages, his arm in a sling. He looked older than he had a week ago, as if the battle had aged him years in hours. "We gather today to honor those who gave everything," he began. His voice was steady but could hear the grief beneath it. 47 of our brothers and sisters will not be going home. They died so that others might live. There is no greater sacrifice. He began to read the names, slowly, carefully, giving each one the weight it deserved. Lieutenant, Weapons Officer. He stayed at his station when the power failed, manually targeting the enemy until the last moment. Petty Officer Song, Medical Technician. She died shielding wounded patients from debris. Ensign Han Sara, Security Officer. She gave her life to protect her commanding officer. At this name, O closed his eyes. He stood near the front of the crowd, supported by a crutch because his legs were still healing. Tears ran down his face. He did not try to hide them. The names continued. Each one was a life. Each one was a story that would never be finished. Each one was a person who had chosen to stand between death and the people they loved. When the last name was read, silence fell over the cargo bay. 1,600 civilians stood among the surviving crew. Mothers held their children close. Fathers wiped tears from their eyes. They were alive because 47 people had chosen to die. Finally, Lieutenant Commander stepped forward. Her arm was in a cast, but her voice was clear and strong. In the human tradition, we honor our fallen with words and memories, but we also honor them with action. The best way to respect their sacrifice is to live lives worthy of the gift they gave us. She turned to face the crowd. Go home to your families, hold them close, tell them you love them, and never forget that you are here today because heroes lived among us. The service ended. People began to drift away in small groups, talking quietly, supporting each other. Some wept openly. Others held their grief inside, saving it for later. Remained in the cargo bay long after it emptied. He sat on a storage crate, his sensory fronds drooping with exhaustion. His recording equipment was still running, capturing everything, but he had stopped paying attention to it. He was trying to understand what he had witnessed. After an hour found him there. She looked exhausted, her eyes red from tears and lack of sleep, but she managed a small smile when she saw him. You are still here, chronicler. I am trying to understand, admitted. I have observed your species for weeks. I have seen your battle. I have watched your mourning, and I still do not understand. Sat down beside him on the crate. For a long moment she was quiet. What do you not understand? Everything, extended his sensory fronds in frustration. Your species wastes time on games and music and laughter. You sleep for a third of your lives. You are inefficient in every way that matters for survival. And yet you won a battle that should have been impossible. You defeated an enemy that has never known defeat. How? Looked at him with eyes that held both sadness and warmth. Because we love each other. I do not understand. I know you do not. She was quiet for another moment, gathering her thoughts. You see our games and our music and our laughter as inefficiency, wasted time, wasted energy. But that is because you do not understand what those things really are. Then explain it to me. Those things are connections. When we play games together, we build trust. When we make music together, we create harmony. When we laugh together, we share joy. These connections are not waste. They are the foundation of everything we are. She stood up slowly, wincing at some hidden pain. When the battle started, every person on this ship knew what they were fighting for. Not for duty, not for honor, not for survival. They were fighting for each other. for the people they had shared meals with and told jokes to and played games with, for the connections that made their lives meaningful. Considered this. His species did not form such connections. They observed and recorded, maintaining careful emotional distance from everything they studied. It was how they had survived for millions of years. But many of them died, he said. Does that not mean the connections failed? No, shook her head firmly. The connections are why they were willing to die, and why their deaths meant something. Han Sara died protecting O, not because she was ordered to, but because she loved him like a father, stayed at his station because he loved this ship and everyone on it. They died not to end their connections, but to protect them. She turned to face him directly. You asked how we won an impossible battle. The answer is simple. The fight because they want to conquer. They fight for power, for territory, for resources. Those are good reasons from a certain point of view, logical reasons, efficient reasons. Her voice grew harder. But we fight for love. And love is not logical. Love is not efficient. Love is a fire that does not care about odds or tactics or reasonable expectations. When you threaten what a human loves, you awaken something in them that has no limits, something that will not stop, cannot be reasoned with, and fears nothing because everything it fears losing is already at stake. Sat in silence for a long time after she left. His sensory fronds moved slowly, processing her words. Love, such a small word, such a simple concept. His species had dismissed it long ago as primitive emotion, a weakness to be overcome through evolution. But watching humans was no longer sure his species had been right. He finally left the cargo bay and returned to his quarters. His report to the collective was waiting to be completed. He sat at his console and tried to find the words to explain what he had learned. In the end, he wrote this. I have observed humanity in battle. I have watched them face impossible odds and refuse to surrender. I have seen them die for each other and mourn their dead with tears. I have spent weeks among them, studying their strange ways. I came to observe a species. Instead, I witnessed something my people have forgotten, perhaps something we never had. Humans are not the most advanced species in the galaxy. They are not the strongest or the fastest or the most intelligent. By every measure we use to evaluate species, they should be nothing special. But there is something in them that defies measurement. They call it love. They call it connection. They call it family and friendship and loyalty. These words are inadequate to describe what I have seen. When a human loves something, they become more than biology, more than training, more than the sum of their parts. They become a force that cannot be stopped by weapons or overwhelming numbers or any power in the universe. My recommendation to the collective is simple. Do not threaten humanity. Do not attack what they love. Do not mistake their kindness for weakness or their mercy for inability. I have observed 8,000 species in my career. I have feared only one. Not because of their ships or their weapons or their tactics. I fear humans because they have discovered something that makes all of those things secondary. They have discovered that love is the most powerful force in the universe, and they are willing to burn everything down to protect it. Finished his report and sent it to the collective. Then he sat back and looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Dominion was licking its wounds and learning a lesson it would never forget. Other species were watching, learning, adjusting their opinions of the young species called humanity. And in a small medical bay on a damaged ship was still treating the wounded. In a corridor filled with memories, O was visiting the spot where Han Sara had saved his life. In a quiet room, Captain Park was writing letters to the families of those who would not be coming home. They were humans. They were terrifying. And finally understood why.